So, interesting subject, deep fakes. So, what are deep fakes and where will people potentially have seen them?
Yeah. So deep fakes are AI generated fake videos, images, or audio created to try and convince the viewer or the listener that they are someone else. So you may remember the Channel 4 news presenter, Kathy Newman, discovered that she'd been the victim of deep fake porn last year, and she really powerfully reported on it last year. And I think deepfake porn is perhaps the best known of the deepfakes, but actually there are lots of different deepfakes being used. So there's deepfakes to demean, which is what Kathy Newman's experience was, deepfakes to defraud, and then deepfakes to disinform. And largely they are coordinated and often part of large scale criminal activity. And I think for me, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this today was they're so convincing that even really seasoned professionals struggle to tell them from the real thing, because they've got that mix of fact and fiction. So often there'll be some original footage in what you're looking at, but then it suddenly switches to AI generated material. Some of the other examples that perhaps are a little bit better known, but I think are really relevant for communications and PR people, are a Hong Kong based engineering company called Arup, where one of their team members was on a video call thinking that they were speaking to another senior Arup executive who requested an internal transfer of funds, which led to £20 million disappearing from the company. And just sort of hearing that puts a huge fear into me, right? You imagine that you're sitting talking to somebody and actually it's just a total fake, and a really convincing fake. Taylor Swift as well was involved in a deep fake with a brand partnership with Le Creuset, the cookware company. Now, she had done some work with them, so there was some existing footage of her talking about Le Creuset. But what the scammers did was take the real footage and merge it with fake AI generated footage, essentially trying to get people to click on malicious links. It was part of a kind of free cookware a competition or advertisement. And actually, just this week, I was looking at what's going on in terms of deep fakes this week. Just this week, I don't know if you saw on X, there was an image of a man in Union Jack boxer shorts throwing water over the MP Zara Sultana when she was speaking publicly. Got about 3 million views. It was pretty quickly identified as a fake, but 3 million people had already seen that before it was
Yeah.
identified. And I think, you know, it's scary. And it's also scary because there's a bit of research, there's lots of research actually, but one bit of research that really stood out to me was how vulnerable people are to deep fakes. So this study looked at about 2,000 US and UK consumers and showed them a mix of real and AI generated content. And only about 0.1% of participants could identify the difference. So if you like switch that round, 99.9% of audiences, employees,
Yeah.
customers, partners could be deceived. And I think, look, you and I both know misinformation and disinformation has long been a major threat to comms professionals, but it's kind of like deep fake just supercharges it,
Mm.
because it's an emotional button that gets pushed, right? It provokes a reaction. It's this kind of content that goes viral, draws attention, and ultimately really damages reputation. So for me, it's both a scary but really topical issue. And the descriptors I gave you at the beginning are actually part of a really interesting Ofcom discussion paper, which I can share with you. I'm sure you can share with
Yeah.
people, breaking those deep fakes into those three categories. So the demeaning ones, the ones created to humiliate or abuse a victim, the defrauding ones, which are used to deceive individuals, ultimately for material gain for the perpetrator, and then the deep fakes that disinform, like the one of Zara Sultana, to kind of sow distrust and disinformation amongst a whole population, a subset of a community, whatever it is. So yeah, that's sort of a bit of an overview from my perspective of deepfakes. Okay, so deepfakes aren't going anywhere. They're ubiquitous. They really, really are. There was a survey last year of, think, about 1,200 people in the financial and payments sector, which showed that there'd been an increase of 2,000% in deepfake fraud attempts. Not unusual, I suppose, in that sector, in the sense that there literally is money to be made there. There was another report last year, which was one of those global reports that looks at risk, and it spoke to about 23,000 people and found that when it comes to technology-related risks, AI ranked fourth, with a particular focus on AI-powered misinformation and hard-to-spot deep fakes. That was the AXA Future Risk Report. And it's now so easy for anyone with a little bit of knowledge and free tools to create deep fakes. I don't know about you, Amanda, but I know that for us at Mangold Consultancy, there are a lot of clients who are talking to us about it. We're reading about it, we're hearing about it, and it's something we're definitely prioritizing for clients. I suppose the good news is that you don't need to rip up the crisis playbook. The same principles still apply. The difference, and the crucial difference with deepfakes, is speed, is the need for a really, really rapid response, because of how quickly these images and videos and audio clips are generated and distributed. I just don't think brands can sit and see what the impact's going to be. I think brands need to be ready. And I think the central comms goal is to get out with the "this is a fake, this is not us" message, right? Just get out there as soon as you can. I think the deepfakes we're more aware of have tended to be politicians and celebrities, but this has got to be addressed by everyone in brand comms, corporate comms, and PR as well. Because the impact on the brand, because the impact of deepfakes on brands affects all audiences, employees, customers, political stakeholders. Anyone seeing them could be led to a bad impression of the organization. And they're convincing. They are convincing. They've got that little bit of fact, that little bit of fiction. And it's absolutely critical that as comms professionals, we're ready to respond. I think one of the things that I was thinking about is kind of, how do you know it's a deep fake?
Yeah.
And as we talked about already, 99.9% of people don't know that, or aren't able to distinguish between real and AI generated material. But there are some pointers you can use, right? When I talked about the MP Zara Sultana having the water thrown on her, there were some things that happened in the clip that provided evidence and pointers that this could be fake. So the Union Jack on this man's boxer shorts kind of changed shape, quite a tricky flag, right? And it changed shape and adapted throughout the video. The water coming out of the bucket looked unnatural, you know.
Yeah.
Think of cartoons and how cartoons have come on since we were younger to now, right? The water's often always the difficult thing to do. It's just like hair, really. At one point in the video, I think Zara Sultana's arm disappears and her facial features change during the video as well. And there are things, I think, like, imagine the old days of people lip syncing on Top of the Pops, right? Often the lips are not showing what the person is saying. That's a
Yeah.
big giveaway. And then there's things like sort of the tone of hair, or the lighting changes, or the skin tone changes, or there's a little bit of blurring in the video. And one of the key things is that AI is not brilliant at being able to generate facial emotion. And so there are odd things that happen. I don't know if you've seen them yourself, where you're like, that just looks slightly robotic, or looks slightly at odds with what you'd expect to see. The core advice for dealing with deepfakes remains the same as general crisis advice. And for me, it falls into 3 areas: content, plan, and training. And I'm not sure those will be a huge surprise to you either, Amanda. From a content point of view, it has never been more important than with deepfakes to have pre-approved content. Another crisis comms expert we both know, Philippe Bormans, calls it a truth bank. This allows you to respond rapidly. So think of it like a folder full of verified, accurate information about you, about your company, your policies, your practices. It's all the usual content: media statements, social media statements, Q&A, maybe a pre-recorded video, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. It's your narrative ready to go in the event of a deep fake emerging, so you don't have to wait to get the team around the table to have a discussion about what you're going to say. It's ready to go, it's ready to deploy, and it's ready to deploy in the spaces where it needs to be.
Yeah.
So your website is going to be a really powerful channel for immediate rebuttal. If you've got accounts on various different social media platforms, you need to be using those responses where the deepfake is trending. It may be that you want to record a pre-recorded video. It may be that it is doing so much damage to you personally, or the brand and what you stand for, that the best response is to get out there and say this is fake. So you might say something like, "Hi, I'm Abby Mangold, the real Abby Mangold, founder and MD of Mangold Consultancy. We're aware that there are some videos circulating on TikTok of me speaking about our clients. I want to confirm the video is fake. It's not me speaking. It's the result of AI being used to try and damage our reputation." So you can pre-record something along those lines that's just about broad enough to cover it. And of course, you could have a crisis protocol where, when you get the deepfake coded message, you know that you've got to be ready to be on a call in 10 minutes time. But the other thing I was thinking about, I was just really thinking about social and how social works, is you could almost comment on the posts. And we've spoken a little bit about that proactive versus reactive response. And, there are decisions that need to be made here about the tipping point for when you would go proactive. But let's assume that this is doing a lot of damage, right? Let's assume that we cannot let this run, that the narrative is out of control and we need to bring it back. So it might actually be helpful to encourage people to repost your genuine content. So you might actually comment where other people are talking about you and say, comment here if you'd like a real video of our real founder, Abby Mangold, talking about why this content is fake. And then you could even go further and have something like, if you ever see content of me or anyone from Mangold Consultancy speaking and you're not sure if it's real, please go to our website or go to our social media accounts, which are verified, to see if we've posted it there. And if you've ever got any questions, give us a call. So I think there are some things you can do around video content to drive people to the real thing. The critical thing with deepfakes is that emotional impact. I'm talking about, recording a video. I've seen a lot of people speaking after they've been deep faked, and it's awful. It's really, really
Yeah.
awful, and it's really dehumanizing as
Mm.
well. And it's that emotional impact that really supercharges this content and makes it go viral. The other reason a swift response is important is for LLMs like ChatGPT, right? Because we want them to learn the correct information that this video is fake and be able to set the record straight as soon as people start searching on it later on, or as soon as people start searching. So we write the kind of collateral that I'm talking about, the kind of toolkit or the bank of information we write for a huge number of clients. And typically we've done that on topical issues. So it might be if you're the victim of a cyber attack, or it might be if you've got a product problem. The thing about preparing that stuff in advance is it's an excuse to get senior leaders around the table to think about what would we do, how would we respond? So it provokes that conversation, which I know for some comms people, getting people to the table to talk about these things can be challenging. So that's content. The other bit is the plan, and a deep fake scenario plan is going to be really important here. And for me, those protocols should include rapid detection, should definitely include details of the social media platforms and how to contact them, even though you may not be able to get takedown that quickly. Yeah. And then some of that pre-agreed content, which I've just spoken about. And there are some really interesting rapid detection tools out there. So they are deepfake and deepfake identification and verification tools. It's a really evolving area. Loads of companies popping up and doing it. The challenge, as with all things technical, right, is can the verification keep up with the fraudsters, basically? But there are tools out there. In headlines, they work by trying to detect whether it's deep fake or not. So some of them use facial recognition, facial patterns, biometric solutions. We talked earlier about the way the face moves, the patterns, its inconsistencies in the movement of the face. A really interesting one for me, and often they can be trained on actual pictures of the real person or video content of the real person. Iris recognition is really, really interesting because I didn't know this, but the iris has really complex patterns that are unique to each person. So that's a pretty good way of identifying whether something is real or not. There's also software, particularly given the Arup example I gave to you at the beginning, that can sit in your video conference rooms and tell you if someone is fake or not, which just, it kind of blows my mind. Technology is just amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. So that can do it live. There's also audio software that sort of listens for synthetic voices. And then there are other programs which it's like narrative intelligence. So it's constantly looking out there in the wild for any deep fake material, using some of the things I've already spoken about. But what's really interesting is it's combining that with the way in which that information is disseminated. So if it sees something with loads and loads of bots pushing it, it will use that to assess that it's a deep fake, which again, the level of detail and what's available is great. We had something yesterday with a client where a consumer had complained about a product on TikTok. We were initially thinking it could be fake. And so we ran it through a detection software program. It wasn't fake, it was real. But it was heartening for us to know that we'd run it through that, and we knew that it wasn't a fake. It didn't massively change the response. Again, it depends on the context. This wasn't a deep fake of the CEO of the organization, but it was a consumer complaining about the product. But it was reassuring to know and helped navigate our communication strategy. So rapid detection. I talked about takedowns on the social platforms. Look, I think they're getting better at it. But I think they are struggling to keep up with the speed of distribution. Yeah. There's automated content moderation, there's filtering systems, but there's a lot of deepfake stuff out there, right? And if people like Elon Musk, Mr. Beast, the big YouTube influencer, and Taylor Swift struggle to get their content taken down, I think that's pretty good indication that it's not easy, which is why having content ready to debunk what is being said is going to be so critical, ready to go, rapid response. I think at the very least, if you've got the contacts at the social platforms where you're seeing a deep fake, at least you can do the initial alert, even if you have to wait a bit longer for the stuff to be taken down. And my final key for people in order to prepare for this is training. Practice. I mean, run a simulation, take the team through a full-blown deepfake scenario, or even do it as a desktop exercise. Just create your own deepfake, even if it's just an image rather than a video, although, as I said, it is really quite easy to do, and run the team through it. It's the kind of thing we do at Mangold quite a lot. Again, it's brilliant for getting people around the table. It's brilliant for holding people's feet to the flames a little bit on what that risk feels like and how you're going to manage it. And the other thing that it does is identify the gaps, right? And it shows you we're pretty good on this element, but actually here we need to really tighten up as an organization. And you know, your people are a huge asset. We've spent all this time talking about artificial intelligence, but, you know, your people know you, for example, as a CEO well, and therefore if they see something that they think is fake, it probably is. So empowering them to be able to do that and to be able to flag that and to know what that process is super, super important. So content, plan and training would be my kind of top tips, I think.